water. Okay, so today we are going to be draping the skirt slopers. Now, the skirt sloper is probably, I think, of all the slopers you could drape or draft, probably the most functional of all the slopers. It's the one that requires the least amount of adjustment. It's pretty straightforward. It's basically just a tube that sort of tapers to the waist, and that's it. But before we can do any of that, we have to adjust. We have to give ourselves another reference point on the mannequin that allows us to drape a skirt or to work with the skirt, especially a straight skirt, because they're quite simple. So in order for us, so let's kind of backtrack a little bit. We talked about this briefly that very first day. We talked about HBLs and horizontal balance lines. And in this case, the waist is a horizontal balance line, meaning it is a line that cuts the mannequin and is parallel to the floor, perpendicular to center front. In order for us to sort of have another reference point, we could use the base of the mannequin. It's okay to do that, but sometimes we need to make sure that we have a midway point in the torso that allows us to go back to it. Now, that line that we're going to have around the body is a hip. Is a hip line. I just stopped eating almonds before class. So that hip line allows us to, sorry, I'm tangled. That hip line allows us to have a reference point that we can go back to in case we need it. It's also like at the side seam, when we join the two seams together on the side, it gives us another point at which to connect. We will be marking the hip with twill tape. And this is black twill tape, 1/4 inch, and it just goes around the body like so. Now, where does this go on the body to mark the hip? Well, you have some choices. Remember when I said to decide whether you want the top, the middle, or the bottom of your tape on the mannequin at the waist to determine where your waist is? Well, for me, when I draped the bodice, I chose the bottom of the twill tape. So that is where my skirt drape is going to start. Now, from that line right there, we are going to come down a specific measurement and mark it across the mannequin. And when we do that, it's going to give us a hip line that we can then tape. Now, cards on the table. When I drape, I typically do not use a hip line because I think it's a personal thing for me. I don't need it when I'm draping because I don't drape the way a lot of other people drape. But as far as like learning is concerned, it's kind of important to have, that way you have some kind of reference later on. If you look at like professional mannequins in ateliers or couture studios, you'll notice that they have a lot more on this mannequin than I do. And you'll also notice the types of mannequins that they're using. They're not using these kinds of mannequins. They're using some that are completely devoid of detail. That way they can mark on there exactly where they want all of their princess lines, their waist, and all that stuff. So a lot of those mannequins that they're using are not necessarily a lesser quality, but just they have no details on them, so they can put all the details on. For us, for learning, starting with these sort of like mannequins that have princess lines and everything on it, this works out good for us because we don't really have to think too much. But later on, once we start getting into things like princess lines, excuse me, once we start getting into things like princess lines, we'll talk about how these lines can change. But for now, what we need to do is determine a hip line on here. So your hip line is anywhere from 7 to 9 inches from your determined waist. Now, why 7 to 9? Because some people's hips are just slightly higher, some people's hips are just slightly lower, and that's a nice butter zone to sort of get things where they need to be. So any of those measurements between 7 and 9 inches is perfect. So I always split the difference, and I go 8 inches. So on the mannequin, I'm going to measure 8 inches. And I'm just going to put a little pin for now at center front. Let me zoom in so you can see. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little pin at center front. Now, it's all well and good to go back and say, oh, okay, I'm just going to measure 8 inches all the way down. That doesn't work. Because if you look at the shape of the body, there's more fullness back here than there is here. So this, if I measured 8 down, it's actually going to be higher because I'm going over a curve. So here, that's just a starting point. Okay, let me go get my tape measure. Hold on just a second. I thought I had it here, but I forgot to get it. I'll be back just a second. Headsets and cables, that's my entire life right now. Okay. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this 8 inches right there. And if I were to slide this over, it's still pretty flat right here, off to this princess seam. If I keep going up like this, it's actually going to go up. So I need to keep it at the waist, marked at 8 inches, and slide it until it still stays on the flat part. And again, I'm doing this at an angle, so I've got to kind of budget. Oh, that's wrong. Okay, so I'm just keeping it at the flat part. And each mannequin will just be slightly different because of the shape of the mannequin or the size of the mannequin or whatever. So like I said, I always keep it at 8. You could take it all the way to 9. You could take it to 7. It doesn't matter. But I like to split the difference when it comes to the hip because you can go up or down from that point forward. Now at this point, my side seam, and like I said this at the very beginning of class, well, at the beginning of the semester, my side seam on this mannequin angles slightly forward. So if I were to follow this down, that could distort the measurement. So at this point, I'm using the physicality at the base of the mannequin. And right here from this point, I'm going to measure up from the, oh, sorry. Can y'all still see that? Okay. I'm going to measure up from the base of the mannequin instead of coming down, because I've already got this point 8 inches down. So here, I'm just going to measure up from this point. And I don't even care what the measurement is because it's arbitrary. So I'm going to mark that with my thumb. Now, on the flat part, I can put that measurement on the mannequin, measure it from the base, on the flattest part here, and still put a pin. And now I've got my front with enough pinpoints to mark where that goes. Now I can still continue around a little bit across the back. And just until it starts to go lumpy at the seat, I can put a pin, okay? Now, this is where it starts to get difficult because on these mannequins, I have a seat. On older mannequins, this is perfectly flat and it's way easier. You just measure up from the mannequin. But here, if I were to measure up from the mannequin from, let's see, this point here, it's like it's going to go into a curve here and then out. So that measurement is going to be a little less than what it should be. However, from the waist here down is pretty flat, kind of, sort of. So let's see what that measurement is at 8 inches. Oh, it's right here at this pin, okay? So I can sort of use this, and if there wasn't a pin there already, you could put a pin in. You can kind of use that as sort of like a midpoint, and that's really all you need. If you have a pin there, great. If not, I didn't even know that was 8 inches. If you have a pin there, great. If not, put a pin in, and that's just a guide for us on the back. Because on the front, what we're going to do is we have all the pins that'll take us to the side, and on the back, what we're going to do is we're going to look at it at eye level and get it straight. It'll be very obvious whether or not, it's crooked or wobbly or something, and you can easily tell from pin to pin if it's straight across, okay? So you also want to, when you start to pin your hip, you want to make sure your twill tape is in an inconspicuous spot. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the side of the mannequin that I typically don't drape on. So I drape 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be draping on the mannequin's right. So I'm going to put my overlap over here. I'm also going to cut the twill tape at a 45-degree angle so it doesn't ravel as much. And I'm just going to put a pin in this just to hold it. Don't sink the pin in all the way yet. We're not done. So I'm just got a pin in here to hold it. And now this, I'm just running across where the pins are. And I'm using that pin in the middle right there as a lever. Do not sink the twill tape into the cavity. The only time you ever do that, and really you shouldn't be doing it anyway, is if you're doing something like if this was a pant mannequin, you'd need to do something that had like an indication that went straight in there if you're doing athletic wear or leggings or something. That's the only time you'd ever do that. So right over here, I'm just going to take this pin out, settle it back down, and sink the pin in. Okay, I'm going to leave this tape hanging for now because I don't know if I'm done. Now, this is going to be the part that's going to be difficult to show on camera, but what I'm doing is, let's see if you can see me, I'm getting eye level with it, and I'm adjusting it to where it's eye level straight. Like you can tell when it's dipping down. I mean, you can see that on camera. So when I'm doing this, I'm just adjusting it to get it to where all those pins are and getting a straight line, as straight as I can possibly get it. Now, again, I'm getting eye level with this, and you can tell when it's correct. I mean, you can easily see this as like an imaginary horizon line, and you can tell immediately when it's off or if it's slanted, which we don't want either. Okay, this looks pretty good. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So once you're happy with it, and this might not be technically perfect for me because I'm doing this, I'm not really in front of it. Once you get it correct, what you do is you put your pins in and you put them in all the way. This is one of the few times you can actually do that. Put the pins in all the way and make sure that your line is perfectly straight. Oops. Okay. And put your pins in. And I'm going to get some more pins. And I'm using the little fine pins. Okay. Don't pin anything back here. Let it be. You can pin on each cheek, but that's about it. Try to get those pins as flat as possible. Whatever angle works for them. You don't want them sticking out of the mannequin. And I am going to change this to a blue pin because it will annoy me if I don't. Okay. And now once I'm happy with that, I can cut the twill tape and I'm going to put another little pin in to hold the other end down. And tuck that other end in. Okay. And then just fuss with it to make it perfect. Okay. There we go. And that's how you'll tape your hip. Pretty easy. Nothing remarkable. Again, take your time with this and double check your measurements below and above, but above only works on the flat part, okay? At one point, you start to curve and it'll throw the lines off. So all of this now should be parallel to the base of the mannequin, which is now parallel to the floor and parallel to the waist. All of these lines perpendicular to center front. Okay, now that we have that done, we can start to drape our skirts. Oops. Okay, so same as always, start with enough fabric that covers the base of the mannequin and above the waist from center front past the side seam. Start with the straight line that I showed you how to draw and pin above what you need. And this time I can use my big pins. Okay. So I'm just pinning a few pins down center front. Now, there are a couple of different ways you can do this. You can start with the darts first, then figure out the rest. I don't like to do that. What I like to do at this point is I like to smooth the fabric over the mannequin, not skin tight. I'm not yanking it. I'm just smoothing it. And you'll notice that you have, like, if you smooth it here, you can get excess down here. If you smooth it here, you can get excess up here. So what you want to do is smooth it directly over the hip line. And just place a pin at the hip. And that's all that's doing, is just holding the fabric in place. Now, on the side, and make sure that when you do that, like nothing's like kicking out or anything. You want it nice and smooth from the hip down as well, okay? So I'm just going to put another little pin down here just to hold it. I might ditch that pin in a few minutes, but basically I just have two pins holding it on the mannequin around the hip and below the hip. Now, take the fabric and smooth it up over the side seam towards the waist and put a pin. Now, I have excess in here that, look, now without even doing anything, what's happening? They want to form darts. Before we can do that, we've got to do some housekeeping. So let's go ahead and get rid of the excess past this waist, always leaving at least a 2-finger halo. Also with this, the same rule applies for ease. If you want to add ease into your drape, so you can see that. That's the side seam right there. If I want, I would mark the side, once we get everything working, we'd mark the side seam and push this forward or back or whatever we wanted. As far as ease is concerned on the waist, it's completely up to you. I've seen some slopers that have at least an inch of ease. I've seen a 1/2 inch. I've seen all the way to 2 inches. And some would even put 4 inches in here, which I think is ridiculous. Because you end up fitting it all out. You don't need it. So in here, I'm not going to put any ease just because I don't want to have to deal with it as a sloper drape, because I don't care if this fits anybody. But if you wanted to put ease in here, remember what we did, and I'll show you again once we mark. You'll move it forward, okay? And now for this, it seems like it just automatically, equal length. Having said that, if you wanted to, you could easily just drape a straight skirt on the mannequin, just like this. The sloper in this case is pretty much functioning skirt pattern without doing a whole lot of alterations to it. You can add ease if you want on the side or whatever, but you could easily just drape a straight skirt, no problem, because that's basically what this is a straight skirt. Except we have the added issue of making sure these darts match other darts at the bodice because we want to connect them together. So like I said, I think that's why the skirt sloper is one of the success stories of slopers, because it's already pretty much a pattern. Now, we're just going to start forming darts? No. Remember when we draped our front and we put that dart somewhere around the princess line? Well, I measured it. On my cleaned up sloper, it is 2.5 inches from center front is where that dart starts. So because I want to try to get this as close as possible, from center front, I'm going to measure around 2.5 inches. Now, here's where we have a slight issue. If you look at this drape, like when I form this dart right here, it naturally wants to do a couple of different things. First is, it wants to be really long. And when I try to force it into position over here, where it's like 2.5 inches, it's really starting to get to the point where this dart is getting too long and it's starting to want to contour to the hip. For most slopers or skirts in general, the front dart, well, let's say size 6 to 8, possibly to 10, the length of this dart is around 3.5 to 4 inches. So for me, when I look at this and I start to pinch this out, that is heckin' gone from 4 inches. So for this, what I need to do is find a happy place where I can sort of have some ease, but at the same time, find a dart that is relatively close to that 2.5 inch mark. So I'm going to put a pin at 2.5 inches. Now, if you'll remember, when we trued our slopers, I said this dart was not in, the dart on the bodice was not in stone, meaning we can still rotate that wherever we need to. In this case, that's 2.5 inches exactly from center front. But my dart doesn't want to go all the way over there. It wants to be very happy over here. Now you'll see that I'm also doing that thing I showed you where I'm sort of rolling the fabric. So I'm trying to get these darts to look slightly the same. I'm also looking at the side over here. I have a decent amount of excess to get rid of up here. I almost have 2 inches to get rid of. This pin, which is just pinned to the fabric, is where I'm trying to go to, but if I don't hit it, I'm not going to cry because this dart can rotate easily. And it would make sense that if I find a happy medium somewhere on the skirt for where my darts should be, it would be, because I have to deal with 2 of them here, it would be way easier just to take that top dart and just tilt it over a little bit. So for this, I'm going to try to find, and what I'm doing here is I'm just rolling the fabric out, trying to find a slightly equal distance, a depth of the 2 darts. I don't know that I've got it perfect, but I'm just going to put 2 pins, one on either side, and you'll see how I'm pinning these. I'm just pinning them in like this, because I don't even know if those are correct, just to hold the darts in place. And let's see where this intake is stopping, like where it looks like it's stopping, is around 4 inches. So by moving the dart over slightly and not aiming directly for the 2.5 inch mark that the dart is at on the front, remember the dart that can easily rotate, I have found a nicer place for my dart to rest. You'll also notice that it's not exactly on, well, you can't see, but it's not exactly on the princess line. Am I going to panic about that? No, because even though this line is used to construct the mannequin, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly where that princess line has to be. So for this, I'm going to let the fabric, this is that hippie stuff again, let the fabric tell me what to do. It's not fighting me here. If I tried to rotate it over here, I got that super long dart. I don't know what to do with it. I've got to fight the whole time. Here, I don't have to fight it. It's just telling me, this makes me happy. You'll be better off if you just listen to what I'm trying to tell you. And I'm going to say, okay, fabric, thank you. I'm not going to fight you just now. Also, if you look at it, you'll notice that there is a little bit of ease in here. And that's great. The thing is, that's why I typically don't add ease when I'm draping a sloper, because I know I'm going to be putting it in there somewhere. And I don't want to add like 1/2 inch, but by accidentally doing 1/2 inch over here, I've added like 2 more inches throughout here by not even doing anything. So I always make it a point to not put a whole lot of ease in here, test it with big seam allowances on the side, which I'm going to show you how to do later on, at the end of this, not at the end of the section. That way you can say, oh, this is where I can adjust things. Okay? Now, having said that, At this point, I'm happy with those dart placements. I don't know that they're exactly the same, but that is something I'm going to be correcting on paper. I'm not going to try to get out a measurement and a ruler and see, okay, are these two the exact same intake? I don't know. I don't really care right now. Placement, I know I can rotate that dart, so that doesn't really matter. Length, I can hack it off wherever I need to, so that's not really an issue. So let's just pin these darts, and then we'll take it to paper, get all the technical measurements we need, and go from there, okay? So for this, once I found my happy place with my darts, I'm going to pin my darts closed. I'm also going to ballpark 4 inches, which is about here, put a pin in sideways just in the fabric, and that will tell me, and don't worry if your darts aren't straight. Okay. Over here, do the same thing. Second dart, down. And then we'll talk about, I'm going to show you, once we do this in paper, how you can move these darts wherever you need them to be. Okay? So now I have 2 pinned darts and a skirt. And you'll notice over here what I'm doing is I'm just adjusting things. I had pulled and messed with the fabric. So you can see that I'm hanging straight here, and my darts are contouring into the body to some degree, and hopefully I have not distorted my center front line. And that is a basic skirt front. And I can get rid of this pin because I don't care about it anymore. Now I'm just going to, well, let's see, hold on. Now I am just going to get rid of some of this excess above the waist. Okay? That's it. That's how you do a skirt front. Now I'm going to move these pins forward. And the reason I'm moving these pins forward is because I'm going to show you how to do this correctly. So as we go throughout the semester, I'm going to be adding techniques to the repertoire. I'm not going to dump it all on you the first day. So for this, we draped the front bodice, we took it off. We draped the back bodice, we took it off. Then we cleaned up the lines, right? Well, this, we have an opportunity to drape the front and drape the back all at the same time. So for this, I just took the pins that were holding it in place and I pushed them forward. Now, I can put another little pin just to hold that flap for now. And that'll just get that fabric out of the way. Now, we can focus on the back. Let's see my cords. I don't have any extra USB ports, or I'd put my lights on for you. My headset lights up. Okay, so same rules apply. We are going to put, oh, I guess I should change. Hold on, let me depin this. I don't like wearing this on my wrist because this is too long, so. Come on. Just pin this. Okay, so I just pinned my pin cushion back here. So we're gonna put, so I gotta pin this first so I can show you. We're gonna put center back at center back. But here's the thing. I'm going to stop putting pins in here at at the top of the seat. The rest of this is just going to hang, and this will sort of be a litmus test as to how you're getting the side seam correct. You'll be able to tell easily if you're pulling too much, it'll distort. So this hanging straight down will tell me if I'm doing this correctly. And also, if I were to pin into the body, it's going to change the shape of the center back and in turn change the shape of the side seam. And we don't want that. Because 9 times out of 10, well, I can't say that anymore, but more often than not, you don't have skirts that like cup under the seat all that much, unless they're out of a knit or something. You can do it if you want, but that's not what this is. That's more of a pattern than a sloper. Okay. So here, I'm going to do the same thing, but I have to, this is going to be hard to do on camera. I'm going to straighten up my hip. At the same time, I'm going to make sure that my skirt is not kicking out and flaring. I'm also going to make sure that I'm not pulling this so much that I distort center back. I want this nice and straight. I want this smooth across the hip. And I'm just going to put a pin at the side seam on the hip. Smooth. And I'm also, and again, I'm not standing in front of this, otherwise you can't see it. But I can tell that by looking here, I've got a straight line hanging straight off the side seam. And I have a smooth seat hanging straight down. In this case, from the highest apex, which is the seat. Okay? Now, same thing. I'm going to put a pin down here just to hold that in place. Make sure this is not kicking in. Make sure it's straight. And you can, depending on your grate here, depending on the cage, you can actually see if it matches up with that line. And mine does, but it's neither here nor there. So, because the cage could be warped. Now, same rules. Smooth this up to the side seam. Put a pin. Now, let's backtrack for a second. There are some mannequins that when you start to drape darts, you can't get 2 darts. Like no matter what you do, the mannequin doesn't want to give you 2 darts. It just won't happen. It's specific to mannequins. At the school, the mannequins with the flat seats, typically you can't get 2 darts out of. But here, I can easily get 2 darts out of. So if you're draping on a mannequin that has a flatter seat, don't panic if all you get is 1 dart. It's fine, because that's what your mannequin is telling you to do. In pattern making, you can take that 1 dart and split it. But on the drape, it might tell you, no, we're not doing that. Okay? Don't fight it, because you're going to be throwing something off somewhere else. You can do it in pattern making, but sometimes you cannot do it on a mannequin, depending on the mannequin you're working with. Yes, there are ways of adding darts, but that's not what the point of this is. That's a pattern thing. That's not a sloper thing. Well, it could be. But so this will tell you what you need to do. In this case, I can easily get 2 darts out of here because she's got a little bit of a seat. Okay, now, remember the same thing we did on the front, I'm going to do on the back. I measured my back, and that measurement was 3 inches for the dart placement from center back. Now, remember what I told you. This dart, we cleaned up, and we made sure that when we pinned it close to the princess seam or whatever, we put it in a specific spot. And we can still slide it if we need to, but we probably don't want to. So for this, I'm going to make a mark on the mannequin, on the fabric, at 3 inches. That's around the princess line, but don't panic about it. Oh, and look, lucky me, that dart wants to form exactly at 3 inches. So I am going to put a pin, like I showed you, on either side of the intake just for now. My other dart wants to form somewhere in between this dart and the side seam. So let it do what it wants to do. It's a grown-up. It can take care of itself. That's it. It's the exact same thing as the front, except you just have to double check this in the beginning, and that's not even that hard. Now that you have your pins in place, on the back, because we have a booty instead of a flat space, well, for some people it's flat. If you have a bit of a fullness down here, this dart needs to be 2 things: A, deeper, and B, longer. And we'll talk about the dynamic aspects of darts when we clean this up on paper. Although that's really a flat one thing. But I'll cover it. So we have 2 darts. Now, the intake here, I don't know. We'll see what the mannequin's telling us, but it can be anywhere from about a 1/2 inch to 5/8 on either side. So again, what this is doing, I'll show you how to clean this up when we get to the paper part, okay? So just get 2 darts back here. Don't worry if they're the exact same intake. Length, though, if the front was 3.5 to 4, the back darts are anywhere from 5 to 5.5 inches. Aiming for 5, tapering to 5.5 if you had to. So for me, right here, putting this where it is, right there is 5 inches. Now that intake still wants to go down a little bit for me, but remember what I said about the front and adding ease. If you don't do anything with that, you can leave that ease in here built in without having to do anything to the side seam. So that's what I'm going to do, because I don't like to add a whole lot of ease because I don't know that I need it. So I'm going to pin these darts where they are. Again, not really panicking about anything, just making sure that I put these where they need to be. And then I'll show you how to make the side seam look really pretty in case you ever have to present something to a designer at a couture house. Okay, so I'm just pinning these darts in. Again, I'm not even caring about their placement just yet. Like, are they straight? Are they crooked? We're going to clean all that up. We need the practice. Okay, so I have pinned in my darts. Now, I'm going to leave that pin in there. And I am going to cut away some of this excess over here above the waist and along the side seam. Always leaving at least 2 fingers, a little halo up and down. Okay? Now, here's the thing. This side seam is very important. We have our bodices that stop at the side seam exactly. And the side seam on a mannequin is pretty pronounced. So it tells us, okay, that's where the side seam doesn't necessarily have to be, but you've got the mark, you might as well just put it there. So for this, I'm going to remove the pins, there you are, that are holding this, and I'm just going to push them to either side of the seam. We did that on the front already, right? There are those, and there are those. Now, this is not the technique we're going to use. We'll actually use this technique once we get to the Princess Bustier, and I'll show you how to get a really sharp contour. What I'm going to show you here is how to overlap a seam and make it look really pretty on the mannequin. Why would you need to do this? Because sometimes you just need to test what is happening on the fabric versus just pinning it into the mannequin. Because sometimes if with all these pins floating around here, you're just pinning them into the mannequin. Well, of course, if you stick a pin through fabric into a mannequin, it's going to stay. But sometimes when you're pinning fabric, when you're pinning something to a mannequin, you don't need to pin it to the mannequin. You just need to pin it to the fabric to see if it's going to float over the body correctly. So for this, I'm sort of figuring out, and all I'm doing is using my fingers to sort of find the crease of where the side seam is. And I'm going to, this is on the back. It doesn't matter. You can overlap the front to the back or the back to the front. And I am just going to get rid of some more fabric on the side, cleaning it up further. Now, I'm going to remove some of these pins without distorting the front drape. I'm just moving them out some. And I'm going to let this back, I'm going to let this back overlap fall flat against the mannequin. Also, I'm getting a little tension right here just because of what I'm doing. So I'm going to clip right up here. That's all that is. Oh, that helped greatly. Now, take the front and estimate, and I'm just finding that side seam, trying to make it pronounced so I can see. And again, I'm going to get rid of everything but about an inch. Oops. Well, close there. Now, what I'm doing is I am overlapping. See that? I'm folding the fabric over the back. And I'm going to take a pin out and I'm going to catch all the fabric layers, if I can. Hold on. Oh, let me use a thinner pin. I'm going to catch all the fabric layers only. I'm not catching the mannequin in here. I'm just catching the fabric layers. Now, the only thing holding this up is the drape, not anything attached to the mannequin. Well, here too. Okay? And you're going to do this all the way down. Right on the side seam. See if I can get this better. Yeah. Just getting it at a weird angle. Okay. You want those pins horizontal, and you want them all nice and pretty. Now, here's the thing. On my mannequin, remember that side seam pushes forward. So I don't want that seam here to push forward at all. I want it to be straight, hanging from the hip. So what I'm going to do is go get my little tool that I forgot to get. Hold on, I'll be right back. Clip on. I'm thinking about getting just like a lavalier thing that we don't have to worry about this. Anyway, okay. So you remember me talking about this? This is a draping plum. It's basically any old piece of jewelry or a rock or something, a bead, something. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be tiger's eye and quartz. Yes, I'm extra. It just needs to be on any kind of string. This is just a thin nylon cording string. And what this does, let's see if you can see this. When I place this on the mannequin and I let this hang, I put a pin in here at the fullest part of the mannequin and just let that hang. What happens is it tells me a straight line. Can y'all see that? It gives me a straight line straight down from where I pinned it. And that tells me, oh, okay, now what I can do, let it relax. This is difficult to do on the side, sorry. So what I'm going to do is just kind of roll that overlap and get it to where it matches let it stop. Okay. And get it to where it matches. I can't tell if that's straight or not. Hold on. Again, not being in front of the mannequin's weird. So let this drop. Stop moving. Okay. And roll the fabric to get it where it needs to be. Now, rolling, rolling, rolling. I have a straight seam for my skirt. And I don't have to worry about, and I don't have to worry about that seam kicking forward because the plums, gravity's going to do the work for us here. It's always going to be pulled straight down. So now that I have that, I pin that bottom part, I can pin the rest of this, hopefully. Nope. Make sure you don't catch the mannequin, just catch that pin out, we don't need it. Take that pin out, we don't need it. Take that pin out, we don't need it. And take that pin out, we don't need it. These can go back as well. Okay? So that is now fabric holding fabric together. And what that lets me look at is whether or not my drape is true. So now I have a side seam that follows the side seam until the side seam pushes forward, which is right here. So it's just going straight down like that. Okay. Now, when I get to the table on Monday, mine might not be perfect because, again, I'm not standing in front of it like I should be doing. I'm standing off to the side at a weird angle. So if mine's not perfect, I'll still show you how to correct it. Okay? That is how you drape a skirt sloper. Well, one way, at least. There's probably like 10 or 12 different ways to do it, but that's how I do it. Now what are we going to do? We're going to we're going to walk to the other table and get our keep forgetting I have the extra long cord. So now we're going to mark this. And it marks the exact same way that we normally would mark. Only we have one more thing to mark on here. So here I'm going to mark my waist. Okay. Sloppy. Now, after I mark my waist, I'm going to mark both edges here because that's my side seam. I have one edge on front, one edge on the back. So I'm going to mark both of them. And it's sort of easy with a chunky marker like this. I can mark both of them at the same time. And when I get down here, oops, sorry. When I get down here, I'm just holding this taut and I'm marking. And then we'll talk about the hem in just a second. Okay, I'm also going to mark, probably do that. I'm also going to mark my darts like we normally would mark them. Okay. A little cross mark, a little cross mark. Like that. Then onto the back. Please be neater when you mark. I just get through this to get through this. But it's also proving a point that you can be the sloppiest marker on the planet and still get a decent drape if you know how to clean it up on the paper. But do yourself a favor and try to get these as cleanly marked as possible. Okay? Now, here's the thing about a skirt sloper. Once you have the hip, you really don't need anything past it because the hip is really just a straight line, a straight drop from that point. However, you do want to give yourself as much leeway on this as possible, so we are going to mark the bottom. So with this, I'm just marking my hip, and I'm going to put a little, that tells me that's the hip. And here, I'm going to mark as well, as much as I can. Then when I start to get to this cavity, hold this taut and mark across. While I'm here, mark center back. While I'm here, stick myself with a pin, mark center front. Okay, got everything marked so far. Now, I'm going to use the base of the mannequin as an approximate, we'll call it a hem, but it really isn't. So I'm going to use this, and I'm not going to try to like mark everything. I'm just going to give myself a few marks like this, and I'm going to make them sloppy. That way you can see how I can correct this if I need to. And here, I'm going to use something. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. In fact, here's just like a little piece of ruler. I'm going to put this at the base of the mannequin. Can you all see that? I'm putting this at the base of the mannequin, sort of flush with it. See it sticking out? And I'm going to mark where that hits it. So put a piece of tape, a piece of paper or a ruler or something in here and give yourself, I'm putting it flush up against the base of the mannequin, and I'm just using this as an indication of where it needs to go. Might not be perfect, but it'll at least get you where you need to like start thinking about it. Okay? Once we have everything marked, I think that's it. Make sure your hip is marked. Do yourself a favor, and when you do this, make sure they connect. That way you don't have any questions about it. So we're going to be needing the waist to match, and we're going to need the hip to match. And here we could probably put something there, although that can change. Probably will. Okay? So that's all you really need for the skirt sloper. Now I can go ahead and take all this off. I can get my pin cushion. I guess if we're not doing that, I need to get a different kind of pin cushion, huh? Actually, what I'm going to do is take this off just on the center front and center back. And hopefully I didn't catch any. No, I didn't. And so there you go. There's the shape of your skirt. Well, half of it at least. And see, if you've done a decent enough with the pinning, you get an immediate shape that happens, at least on the side, you know. So if that's center front. So there's your skirt shape right there. Okay. I'm not going to bore you taking the rest of these pins off. I'll do it over there at the table before Monday. But yeah, so basically you can start designing any skirt you want. There's another thing in when you're doing this. Sometimes if you have a drape, you can actually have a small dart and then a deeper dart over here. So you can have like a dart that's like 2 inches or 2.5 inches towards center front, and then a deeper one that's like 3 or 3.5 to 4 inches. That's fine. That's more of a skirt pattern than a sloper. But once we get to the table on Monday, I'm going to show you how to correct all of your darts and how to get any amount of darts that you need on there, within reason, of course. Okay, so that's it. That's all we're going to be doing today for that, because the skirt is now ready to be turned into paper, and we will be doing that on Monday. And then I don't know if we have a, yeah, after that, I'm going to show you how to, I don't know. I'll have to look at the sloper. I don't remember what the next thing is, but I mean, the syllabus, because I'm trying to add something in there. So it might change a little bit, but it's not too dramatic. All right. So if you have any questions, email me. If you want to work on this at home, work on it at home and send me pictures through email. That way I can look at it. If you have questions, you can email me or Canvas. And if not, I will see you all on Monday. All right. Thanks. Bye.